Here. We have a group of people joining us. We had well over 200 people register, and it looks like a fair amount of those are joining us for today's discussion about claims analytics. And my name is Mark Delicave, and I'm part of Quizzify, and I'm going to introduce Al Lewis, who is our CEO and co-founder. And Al is going to be making the presentation today. And I'll just tell you a little bit, most of you probably know Al, but let me just tell you a little bit about him. Al is one of the foremost authorities on wellness and population health. He authored a book specifically about wellness outcomes analysis, which gets into all sorts of detailed studies about claims and ROI analysis that wellness companies are making. And in addition to that, Al, in 2013, Al and Tom Emmerich, a person who managed benefits at Walmart for more than 12 years, and as you probably know, Walmart has been very much on the forefront of many innovations in employee healthcare. And their book was entitled Cracking Health Costs, and it got into many of the innovations that are now going mainstream, like centers of excellence and better pharmacy benefit management plans. And today we're talking about a specific topic, which is claims analytics. And so without further ado, I'm going to turn it over to Al Lewis.
Okay, well, thank you very much, Mark. We've got a lot to cover, and but I want to tell you why first we have these folks here. As many of you are aware, we have this thing called Valid Vendor of the Month, where Quizzify reviews organizations that have been validated by the Validation Institute, apply an even higher threshold, and then actually guarantee with our money their outcomes. Next. So the way it works is, I mean, we have the rules, and you'll be able to link to where the rules are down below. But basically, anyone who is a joint account, if we hit all of our guarantees as Quizzify, but finHealth does not hit theirs, a third of our fees are refunded to you. So we don't just endorse somebody. A ton of people endorse people. We walk the walk. So we're going to introduce some folks from finHealth right now, and they're going to show you some of these data analytics. I know data analytics sounds boring, but I got to tell you, this is really interesting stuff. And then we'll circle back to how Quizzify fits into that. So it says, please put your questions in the Q&A starting now. People actually already have, so we'll try to answer the questions during the dead time when the polling questions are going up. Next. So I am going to introduce my friend Jim Arnold, who is the founder of finHealth. And before starting finHealth, he actually started a recovery audit company called Apex Analytics. And all you got to do is look at these organizations that signed up for Apex Analytics, and they're all household names, to know that this guy is a heavy hitter in this field. So with that, let's get into the polls. Okay, so we're going to show two questions in a row here. So you're going to actually answer two questions right together. And this is one of these things we've done polling questions. We've never done two at the exact same time. This is one of these things, you know, they say you should never try a recipe on company until you've done it at home. Well, we're doing this for the first time here. So here are the two questions for you. First, thank you. How much do you recover each year? Actually, should be probably each month, from medical billing errors? $1 to $3 per employee a month, 3 to 5, 6 to 12, or you just don't know. And then the second question, and you'll answer these both together, is what % of your or your self-insured employers you advise, in the case of the brokers on the phone, healthcare claims are compared back to the actual medical record? 10% or more, 2 to 10, less than 2, or not sure. So we're going to put the poll up now. And while you're asking that, I will answer. We had a question come in that was kind of a little bit off topic, but we might as well answer it now because we have the time, which is there a correlation between cost and quality when you try to go to a lower cost facility? And the answer is absolutely not. For instance, for day surgeries, easy surgeries, the Surgery Center of Oklahoma will have the lowest price, and by many standards, that's the highest quality. So do we have answers yet, or should I take should I ask you one more question that came in? Oh, yes. Oh, so no surprise here. Essentially, nobody knows. I'm actually shocked that as many people have an answer to the first as they have, because I mean, I wouldn't know. So let's close that out, knowing that we don't know on number one, and number two, knowing that actually shockingly rarely this happens. I'm going to turn things over to Jim to elaborate a little bit.
All right. Well, much appreciated, Al, and appreciate the ability to participate. So what we find, based on a lot of studies, insurance carriers on their fully insured plans, they budget to find $6 to $10 each month.
Hang on. Is everybody hearing you okay?
A little staticky.
Yeah. So try again. At 6 to 10.
Can you hear me okay?
It's a little staticky. Yeah, I'm having issues hearing him. Yeah.
Yeah, I can hear you, Al, but you're a little staticky, Jim.
David, maybe you should
do you want to
honors.
take this one if I'm too staticky?
There, you're good now.
You're good.
Okay, all right. So generally speaking, health insurance carriers, they do audits and they do set targets, particularly on their fully insured plans, looking to recover $6 to $10 per person or per member per month from their plans. There's not exactly the same diligence on the self-insured plans, but we're finding, pretty significant findings. We had one client where we actually recovered $130,000 on the even before we started the audit, and that was $2 per person per month just on that one item.
Go
ahead.
Actually, I think you had one more to do. Yeah.
Oh yeah, the healthcare claims that are compared to the actual medical record, we have found is less than 1%.
So it seems to me that this is not something you should have to demand from your carrier. Isn't the whole point you're paying the bill that they should be getting you the best prices and finding the errors?
That's our perspective as well, but it depends on whether the thought is, are you paying them to pay your bills, or are you paying for them to advocate on your behalf? We feel it's to advocate on your behalf, and unfortunately there's not great financial alignment always with how they make money and when they do a good job for you.
So I'm looking over at this brochure on the right, which I think is actually from a payer, right? That is advertising about its ability to find the errors that it itself makes. Yes.
So they started a program, and we've been doing this for several years, but I think it was maybe a competitive effort to say, well, we'll look at your bills. Now the challenge is they do lack independence. And the other challenge was that oftentimes they would get a fee for this, a saving. So if they processed the bill incorrectly for $100,000, they might stand to make 20% of that if they recovered it on behalf of a client, which is a little concerning.
So they actually would make more money if they made, say, $100,000 error and got it back than if they never made the error in the first place.
That's correct, Al. Yep.
Yes. So, a question came in. Is this 6 to 10 per employee per month or per member per month?
Per member per month.
Okay. All right. Well, this is shocking, but I've been in the healthcare industry long enough. Nothing shocks me. Let's go to the next one. Okay. Another polling question. What are the most common claim processing errors found with large carriers? Quantity and rate keying errors, meaning just hitting the wrong button. Billing for treatments not performed, improperly calculated member discounts, or all of the above. And Mark, will you put the poll up there? I'm going to just look at this other question that came in. Can you stratify members based on their chronic conditions and their compliance with evidence-based medical norms? I can tell you that for you folks, the answer is no, because you're not in that business. It's a bill review, but it's a great question. It just is not.
We actually do something along those lines, Al.
Oh, okay.
Because we know that mathematically that 2% of your members that are, let's say, over 100,000 per, they normally constitute 40% of your overall spending. So if you want to do healthcare advocacy and help steer them through, it's very critical that you're interacting with those folks who are driving the vast majority of your costs.
Oh, very cool. All right, well, let's look at the polling result. And we got 72% saying all of the above. And then the others, well, I'd say maybe a few people made keying errors when they entered because it definitely would be all of the above. So let's close that out and you'll show some examples of these things.
All right, Mark, go on to the next one. There you go. Okay, so the first one we're sharing with you is a quantity error. So you had a set of twins, which, as Al mentioned earlier, or actually in a prior webinar, is one of the top cost drivers for healthcare. And these twins were, under respiratory services for a good portion of their stay. One of them was charged for 71 out of their 78-day stay. The other one, 862 for a 95-day stay. So that was a keying error because respiratory services are normally billed on a daily basis, and somebody fat-fingered that number, and because of that keying error, ended up charging the self-insured plan over $300,000 too much.
Yeah, one would think that there would be something, you cannot consume that much respiratory care. There'd be some kind of check and balance, just like when somebody orders a chemo drug in a hospital, if they put a keying error in, it comes up and says, we think you might have ordered the wrong amount. That doesn't happen?
It doesn't happen. One of the funny ones we found is we had someone who was billed for 8 knee transplants. And so, given that most people only have 2 knees, that was pretty hard to believe that wasn't caught up by some kind of edit, but just sailed on through and got paid at the full price.
That might have been the guy who played Spider-Man on Broadway.
There you go.
So let me ask you another question: is when these keying errors take place, how many of them are accidentally charging way too much, and how many of them are accidentally not charging enough?
Yeah, great question, Al. Well, our findings is it seems to be much easier to charge the rack rate or a higher number than a lower number. And a lot of the edits that are done by CMS kind of back that up because they find about a 5 to 10% underpayment, but 95% of it are in fact overpayments.
Yeah, no shocker there. Okay, let's go on to the next example.
Okay, the next example, I think David, you're going to take that one.
Sure. This is a simple drug test. The fair price where this drug test occurred was $240. For this particular member, by the way, this was for the same member beginning in January. The first 5 drug tests were $506. The next 16 drug tests through the end of April were for $4,275. Okay, now this is for something that should cost $240 a test.
So David, the 240, that's the fair price according to Healthcare Blue Book. That presumably includes a good profit as well. So these folks were not content just to make the profit. They had to make 2 to 3 times as much. And then when that wasn't enough, suddenly they were made 4 times as much as that. So this is just pure greed.
Pure greed, or, Al would like to think it was a simple mistake, but I doubt it.
Yeah. Well, the thing is, if it was a simple mistake, it never would have. Somebody would have caught it before it went to you. I mean, as Jim noticed, it mentioned all these quote unquote mistakes, and I see this in the wellness industry too. Whenever they make a quote unquote mistake in their outcomes, it always shows vastly more savings. They never make a mistake that shows less savings than they're supposed to. Okay. Next.
Yeah, that prior one, just
funny,
the sheer number of
funny question that came in was that asked if it was the pharma bro Martin Schrickle who did that. No, this was a regular person. I'm sorry, I shouldn't be laughing out loud. It was a funny question.
All right, so this one is this was a very tragic one where an employee actually entered the hospital through the emergency room and passed away that evening. So they were at this facility less than 12 hours, and they were billed and paid $594,000 for that 12-hour visit. Now, they did not consume that many hospital resources, and in fact, a lot of the things on here did not occur at all. So if you look at some of those items, you'll see there's $23,000 of pharmacy general, which is generally like aspirin and things like that. There's surgical supplies, sterile supplies, $40,861. Implants, $103,000. These were just things that didn't occur and were just misrepresentations or what we think of as abusive billing.
You wouldn't have time in that time to put in that many implants, even if you were working on them the whole time. Yeah, the irony in this one that I thought is that the EKG, which is one they could have charged a few $1,000 for, no one noticed, they actually charged a reasonable price. I don't know what they were thinking.
Yeah, there you go. And look at the lab tests, 252 of them for $41,000.
That's a lot of tests and a lot of cost per test. You know, the funny thing is, so this person was in the hospital for 12 hours, spent $594,000. Do you remember the movie Brewster's Millions? Where so Richard Pryor was going to inherit $300 million, but only if he managed to spend $30 million in a month. So he rented a baseball team, he did a whole bunch of stuff. All he had to do was show up in a few emergency rooms, and he would have blown through that 30 million in no time. Next slide.
All right, so this is an interesting one. That was, oh yeah, I'm sorry. It was, this is one of those provider discounts. So oftentimes the 30 to 50% of the contracts are what's called percentage of billed charges, which is not a very effective mechanism. It would be, Al, as if I said, you know, I'll give you a 80% discount on everything you find, but I get to set the list price. And so as long as you do the calculation right, you're entitled to charge me whatever you want, and I just can only just perform that calculation. Now, this one, in fact, was an in-network provider that neglected to apply the in-network discount. So they considered it out of network. And normally that discount is about 60%. So this one ended up paying approximately $60,000 too much because that discount was not applied.
So, and it didn't occur to anybody when they got this huge amount. I mean, you know, it's like a monopoly. Somebody makes a bank error in your favor, you know, you don't have to return it. Nobody said, hey, by the way, you accidentally overcharged us.
No, and this is a provider that they spent, you know, literally $3 to $5 million with. So it was one of the largest providers in that community.
And let me ask you, if the reverse happened, if they were an out-of-network provider and you sent them, and the carrier sent them the in-network rate, do you think they would have just let that go as well, or?
Oh, no, they'd make sure that out-of-network rate was paid. In fact, you know, as much as they make on errors, they make far more on negotiating of out-of-network claims. So whatever savings from that very large billed charges down to whatever was paid, you know, oftentimes that's fee-based in most self-insured employer contracts.
So this is an example of what you said before, where if somebody makes a mistake and the carrier side, they actually get paid to fix their own mistake.
That's correct.
Yeah, and yeah. just so folks know, this payment, like let's say they knock this price down from 95 to 25, so there's 70 or 20, whatever it is, it's a little obscured here, but let's say there's 70,000 in savings. How much comes back to you as the self-insured employer?
Most of the contracts entitle them to 20 to 25% of these savings. You know, and we've seen some where the bills start for several $100,000. We had one that was a hernia operation where the room charge for the hernia, so not the procedure, but the room it took place in, was billed at $209,000, and you know, they got it down to $30,000, which was still you know 5 to 6 times the market rate, but they got that 20% of the $180,000 savings.
So they made vastly more money on correcting their own error than the provider made on actually fixing the hernia.
Absolutely. Yeah.
And the self-insured employer, unless they ask, they don't see this. They just see the net amount back to them, right?
Right. Most insured employers have never seen their data in-house. I think there was a SHRM article that said maybe 7% have ever requested their data. So all they know is each week somebody reaches into their bank account and grabs $500,000, $1 million, $5 million. And that's the extent of their visibility to the claim detail.
You know, I'm speechless, and those of you who know me who are on this webinar know that I'm rarely speechless. Okay, let's go to the next example. Okay, we're back to the polls. What is your company paying for ER tests, ER visits, tests, and procedures as compared to the Medicare rates? And your choices are 1 to 2 times, 2 to 4 times, more than 4, and you don't know. And we have a few Q&A in while you're answering that. I will address those. Are these things, one question is, are these things that you are showing us, are they things that you actually resolve or just identified?
Most of them are ones that we've resolved and recovered, but you know,
okay.
You know,
Summary process.
Yeah, one of the challenges is, as you know, Al, that the payer has to agree with your findings, and so sometimes even if it's erroneous, they may not agree with us.
Yeah, so we'll get back to that, because that by itself is a good one. So We're not mentioning names in this webinar, but one question is how many of these were national well-known carriers and how many were independent TPAs? Is there a difference in effectiveness of claims paying between the two?
Yeah, so all the examples we showed were large national carriers, and we find that we haven't done as many of the smaller independent TPAs, but one that we did, their controls were much stronger than what we found with the national carriers.
Well, that's good to know if you're a TPA or an employer thinking about a TPA. So the next question is, are these overpayments actually have to be clawed back from the provider, or is the audit done before the payment goes to the provider?
That is an excellent question. So as most people know, the minute that money goes out the door, it becomes drastically harder to get it back. So what we pitch for self-insured companies and their payers is we only need about an hour to run them through a series of algorithms and tell them to pay it. So we prefer to do it prepayment, but there's fairly significant pushback from the payer community. And so in some cases it becomes after the fact, but that's okay as long as you have the proper dispute provision in your contract. So it says, hey, if I tell you not to pay something and you pay it anyway, that is not my financial responsibility. And so it's definitely, you know, an emerging best practice, but there's significant pushback from the payers. But prepayment is absolutely the way to go. And my prior company has been was doing that for 25 years, starting in '95. That we were catching errors before they go out the door, when you have the leverage and an opportunity to get it at a small fraction of the cost.
Okay, great. Well, there's two other questions, and I know we want to get on, but we're also, this is an interactive webinar, so we want to do the questions. One of them is after my own heart, which is the claim you are showing only adds up to $59,000 where there are other charge lines. So I think you might need to go back one on that. Mark?
Yeah. To this one here?
Oh, yeah, I think that's the one. No, it adds up to 95. Yeah.
See, some of these we're only showing one page of a multi-page bill. They tend to be on lump sums, and most of the larger ones are at least 3 or 4 pages.
Oh, okay, yeah. So good catch, person after my own heart, not believing the data. Why nobody believes the numbers, as my book says. So we do have a couple others, but I do want to get going, so we'll save the others, and let's keep on trucking here. Okay, so we have an answer on this, Mark.
Yeah, I'm sharing the poll results.
Oh, I'm not seeing them, so why don't you say what?
Yeah, I think the top answer was more than 4 times.
More than 4 times. It was 44%, and 25% said 2 to 4 times. 22% I don't know, and 8% said 1 to 2 times.
Okay, great. Well, that's probably actually quite accurate. So let's go to the next slide.
Yes, so this one here summarizes some of the results from the RAND survey. So we've, David and I find when we're reviewing these bills, the vast majority of health systems are charging, between 125% and 150% of Medicare. But there are certain outliers where things are being paid 3, 5, 10, or even 20 times Medicare. And that's what's knocking these rates up so high. So in the upper right-hand corner, you see the RAND study found that in general, on average, self-insured plans are paying about 2.4 times what they charge Medicare patients. Now that ranged as low as I think 156% in Michigan to as high as 311% in Illinois. And we have a couple examples up here where we compare it to some benchmarks. Things like Healthcare Blue Book, which is an aggregation of I think close to 400 self-insured plans as to what's a fair price. We show the median cost that we see within the population. And we also show what Medicare would charge. And the Medicare ones are very precise because they take into account that specific hospital, their cost structure. And so they are very precise in terms of diagnosis and medical code, and is probably our best benchmark.
So when you say it's 2.4, or the numbers that you gave, is that a combination of in and out of network?
Yes, that's in and out of network. And normally we find that 90% is in network, 10% is out of network, but it varies widely across the national carriers as to what they consider in network versus out of network.
Yeah, and now if I could interject, the other thing we see is is, 90% of those, 90 to 95% of those are actually charging what would be considered a reasonable rate to Medicare. So that 125 to 150% of Medicare. And then it's the ones that you see on the screen that are 3, 5, 10 times the amount that pushes that up to 2.4 times. So, but it's usually only in the data we see about 5% of your population are egregiously billing like this.
And that 5% probably accounts for about 20% of the cost, though.
Exactly.
Absolutely. Yeah. Absolutely.
All right, let's move on.
Okay, so here's an example for what should be a relatively simple appendectomy. And again, this is not for the operation. This is for the room that the appendectomy was performed in. And this encounter cost $140,000. And that's approximately 10.7 times what would be considered a fair price, and very similar to what Medicare would charge. And you can see some of the items on there: the CT scan, the appendix. They're pretty much all at fairly high rates.
This is just for the room?
This is just for what they call the facility, which is, room and associated things. This isn't, this isn't the surgical procedure. This isn't the assistant. This is not the professional expenses at all, just the facility.
So hopefully they put chocolates on the pillow. Yeah.
I doubt it because it's a one-star facility. So.
Oh, okay.
Oh, yeah.
So let's just that we have a couple of these are actual monies paid, including this is money billed with all discounts, all network discounts applied, correct?
Yes, we're only showing you what's referred to as allowed amount, which is the money that went out the door into the provider's pocket. So some of the payers will provide us the billed charges. Some of them will not, because they're afraid we'll find out their discounts. But to us, the discounts are very illusory, and we don't really care what that discount is. We just want to know how much money went out of the self-insured plan to pay for that care.
Okay, so one other question we just have to clarify. This presentation is about finHealth and Quizzify. We're actually doing Quizzify now, so we don't. I'm sorry, we're doing finHealth now, and the question is how does Quizzify plug into a client's data? I think they mean how does finHealth plug into the client's data?
Right. Well, what we see is that Quizzify basically imparts knowledge for the self-insured employer to make better decisions, and that's just give them context, understand healthcare. finHealth provides knowledge about your specific data, your specific scenario.
I think it was a more logistical question. How do you get the data?
Okay, all right. Yeah, so logistically, what happens? Ideally, commensurate with your funding cycle, whether that's daily or weekly. We get a feed of that data from your payer. We load it into a data warehouse. We don't need any protected health information. We run it through a series of algorithms. Within an hour of receiving that data, we will report back to the payer those things that we believe they shouldn't pay. Ideally, they'll put those on hold, await medical records, and then validate them when those medical records come in. And normally that's, we just do a fraction of the transactions, 1/10 of 1%. We have one client that, for example, does 3,000 claims a month. We usually flag somewhere between 2 to 6 claims that are either clearly erroneous because they're ineligible, it's a duplicate payment, it's a medical coding error, or they're just so far away from, what's a reasonable cost that we want to stop those and make sure that the proper documentation is provided.
Yeah, I think so. I mean, for the purposes of the webinar, and they can get in touch with you later. And by the way, everyone will be getting a copy of this. We're not mentioning the names of the perps, although we will do it privately if somebody wants to ask. But is there anyone on the good side? Is there the question is there a hospital system that is generally much more accurate than others?
We find that unfortunately, there seems to be an inverse correlation. So the very highly rated providers via Medicare tend to be, more accurate in their billing, and it's more the ones that either do things infrequently or just have very antiquated billing systems. But we find somewhat of an inverse relationship. But, we found issues with even some of the premier names there that they make mistakes as well. But by and large, if I were to say, if you push toward high quality care, more than likely your costs will drop dramatically.
Okay, next.
Okay, this one is for not for the repair of the broken arm, but again, the facility charge. This person went to a 2-star rated facility in Springfield, Illinois, for a compound upper arm fracture. The doctor was paid $1,865. The anesthesiologist paid $580. Unfortunately, the facility got paid $78,540.
You know, for that amount, honestly, they should have just given the person a new arm.
I agree. A bionic arm would have been in order at that price.
Okay, next.
Okay, well, this is a very visual one. So this one was for abdominal pain, and if you didn't have abdominal pain when you went in, you certainly would have gotten it once you got this bill. So this is an unrated facility in a roadside strip mall, and for that room charge, they paid $52,508. This was auto adjudicated. There was no stopping it. Just went out the door. Emergency care of East Houston. And you know, these are ones that are very concerning. You really have to intercept them before the money goes out the door.
So,
they're in network also. Yeah.
Okay, why they are in network, it shocks me, but this is a particular thing that one of Quizify's bugaboos is teaching employees how to distinguish, because presumably the employee had to pay 10 or 20% of this thing. Teaching employees how to distinguish between urgent care, which is one of the best deals going in healthcare, and freestanding ERs, which are specifically designed to rip people off by looking like urgent care facilities, which is exactly, as you can see from this picture, what it does. And we will eventually segue into how employees can avoid getting these fees, these charges from these freestanding emergency rooms with our surprise bill hack. But in order to do that, you have to recognize that you're going to an emergency room, despite they're trying to prevent you from doing exactly that.
Yeah, and now if I can interject real quick, because it's a very astute audience we have attending today. We have a couple clients where we get the bill charges. This happens to be one of them. So we know that it was billed and paid at 100%. The majority of the payers don't send us bill charges because they say it's their proprietary discount information. But this happens to be one we get it from.
Okay, let's go on to the next and park the ER surprise bill thing in the back of your mind, because we're going to be coming back to it. So in the interest of time, actually, let's just quickly do this one, then we'll segue into more info about CT scans and other things. So another polling question for everybody. What does your average CT scan cost? And there are your 4 choices. And while you're looking at it, I am going to read another question. And if we don't get to your questions, we will answer them. $3,000 an hour for hospital observation based on the lowest claim line seems insane. Well, remember, you're only seeing, in all fairness, you're not seeing the average typical hospital in these things. You're seeing the outlier hospitals. But those outlier hospitals, as you heard, that 5% is generating 20% of your cost. Okay, there's an actual company name here that we probably shouldn't mention. Oh, we got our results. Okay. More than $1,000 for a CAT scan, and yet you can get them if you shop around using reference-based pricing. You can get them for vastly less money. Can you sue to get your money back from these people? I don't know. Can you?
I don't think so. I think once that money goes out the door, the chance of you ever seeing it again is pretty remote.
Yeah, and also remember, you sign contracts, and that will bring us to the surprise bill, why you shouldn't, as a patient, be signing contracts that come in your way. So the average fee being over $1,000 for a CAT scan, I'll tee this slide up to you.
Yeah, this is one where we're just showing the wide variation in cost. So this is a client, these are all 2020 expenses. And so the median cost was well under 1,000. There was some charge as high as 11,000 for the very same CT scan. So this is a CPT code 74177, CT scan of abdomen and pelvis with contrast. And yet these were all in the same area of the country. And this is the wide variation in cost. David, anything to add to that?
Yeah, Jim. I put in there kind of as a benchmark. I picked an expensive place. I picked New York City, and a CT scan With contrast, in New York City, the fair price is about $750. So, this client is across the country, but there are 1,503 of these scans. We're only showing the top 250. So think in terms, there's 1,250 scans that are less than that lowest amount over there, less than 1,500. That goes back to the point where, the majority of your providers are probably charging you a fair price. But the ones in red and gray, with red being in-network providers and gray being out-of-network providers, are just taking advantage.
Yeah, so remember, it's that 5%. It's only 5%, maybe a little bit more, that's costing 20% on your health bill. All right, let's skip to we're going to do one more here. What are the reasons you might not be able to benefit from third-party analysis of your claims? Oh yeah, right. Your contract says they have to agree to the findings before they reimburse you. Your contract says you can't use software to do this. Your contract says you can't pay somebody to do it on a contingent basis, or all of the above. These are all rather ridiculous choices, but at least one of them has to be accurate. So while we're waiting for the polls to come in, are you catching the errors prior to the payment or after the payment? We did that one. Do you work with large groups that happen to be fully insured, or do you only work with self-insured?
We really only work with self-insured, and part of it is financially because, first of all, the payer will not let us look at fully insured because they say it's their data. But were there any money to go back, it would go back to the fully insured, carrier, and so therefore there really wouldn't be any benefit to you as an employer to engage us. They would just keep all the findings.
All right, Mark, do we have an answer? Oh my goodness, all of the above wins again. You're seeing a little pattern here. So these are just shocking things that people agree to in their contract. So contract stipulates carrier must agree to the findings. That would be like when you go to court and the defendant gets sentenced, that the defendant has to agree to be sentenced. Okay, and yet it is in your contract. The second thing is your contract might actually prohibit an outside claims review using software. Maybe it's a Flintstones thing or something, but I don't know how else you would do it, right? I mean, how else would you do this aside from software?
Yeah, well, we've seen it where you can use software, but you have to use the software that adjudicated the claim exactly as it was adjudicated. So your answer would be the same, right? But we've actually seen this clause in contracts.
And there are contracts that say you can't even do this. You can pay people a flat rate, but you can't pay them per error found. And yet, as you recall that earlier brochure that you showed, they're happy to get paid by error found, but they just don't like it if somebody else gets paid by error found.
Right. So they consider it a conflict of interest unless part of that money is going back in their pocket.
Okay, that's well put. Okay, next. All right, so I'll turn it over to you, Jim, to wrap this section up.
Yeah, this is something that, for somebody in benefits, it's incredibly challenging to negotiate that contract, and it's a 70-page agreement, might have a 50-page addendum. But these are things that you absolutely want to have in there to protect your interests. First of all, be clear about who's the owner of the data for your self-funded plan. You're the fiduciary, you're on the hook for it, you should own that data. Second, make sure you have audit rights, virtually unrestricted audit rights. So there can't be things to say, you can only pull 250 claims, or you have to use statistical sampling, or it has to be done within 5 days. I mean, we've seen some things that just make for virtually impossible. And regardless of how good your payer is, they are not independent. You cannot be the record keeper and the scorekeeper. Go for full disclosure of all fees. Most of the fees you're paying are not the per head fees. They are associated with audits, with other programs, perhaps out-of-network discounts. So you want full detail on all those fees. Make sure there's performance guarantees, and make sure that someone independent is measuring them. And finally, just make sure there's some teeth in it. So for some of them, if you do an audit and you pull 250 claims and every one of them is incorrect, almost all the national contracts say that you cannot extrapolate the findings to the population for recovery. So again, you can't get any of that money back were they to not do a good job in processing your claims.
Okay, and then just, how do you guys work?
Okay, so we work in two ways. As you know, Al, some cases we're prohibited from contingent fee, but normally if you talk to the payer and it's around renewal time, they'll usually take out that rather onerous provision. But we work ideally in real time. We catch the overpayments before they go out the door. And to back it up, we do a free proof of concept. So if we can sign an NDA, you want to send us 12 to 18 months worth of data, we will run through it at no cost to you. And we will show you how much savings opportunities are there before you move forward with any type of contract or financial commitment. If you move forward, you will never be out of budget because it's either done on a contingent fee, or in the event that we have to use a subscription model, we offer a performance guarantee that we will deliver at least that much in savings as our subscription fees, or we will rebate the difference in an annual true-up.
Yeah, so this is a very easy one for us to do our valid vendor award guarantee on, because there's nothing, there won't be anything left by the time it gets to us. All right, speaking of Quizzify, Mark, you can, okay, so we talked about the price of CAT scans and MRIs, and now the question is the quantity. What % of your CAT scans and MRIs are likely to be unnecessary and potentially harmful? Is it 30% or more, 20 to 29? 10 to 19, or less than 9? And while you're keying that up, we've got a ton of questions. Like I say, we can't get to them. We're going to answer them. Does Quizzify work with broker relationships? Yes. Will finHealth work? Is there a minimum size for finHealth?
Normally on our, not for contingent fee, no. We typically, most of our clients are anywhere from 5,000 to 125,000 member lives, but we do work with some that are smaller than that. And, if it's a subscription, sometimes we'll have a minimum fee, but we usually can work that out so that they're just not out of pocket at all.
Cool.
We've done clients as, 1,000, 1,500 employees out.
Yep, true.
All right. So, Mark, what do we get for this one? 30% or more? Yes. And the question is, what are you doing about it? So that brings us to the next slide. So while finHealth is making sure that you're not going to get ripped off on these things, we're going to educate your employees to ask the right questions before agreeing to these things. Because in the immortal words of the great philosopher Peter Drucker, nothing is more wasteful than doing something efficiently that need not have been done at all. Mark? You saw the example for CAT scan of the abdomen with contrast media. That particular CAT scan has about 1,000 times more radiation than a comparable X-ray does. And for goodness sake, whatever you do, if your children are going to get CAT scans, make sure they're really, really necessary, okay? My daughter's still quite upset with me for one she got about 10 years ago, and I said, look, there was no Quizzify back then. They weren't telling us about the radiation. You're also going to get a lot of false positives on these tests. In fact, there's even a name for these. Some of them, they're called incidentalomas, where they find something, quote unquote, find something they're not looking for. Most of the time, that is not going to hurt you. But when you hear about it, you want to do something about it. And there's all sorts of ridiculous financial consequences and stress and the price. And then we're going to leave you with this considering the risks and discussing with your doctor. Don't just assume that just because it's healthcare, it's good for you. Just because it's healthcare does not mean it's necessarily good for you. Next slide. We do twice as many CAT scans as the average country, and by the way, twice as many MRIs as well, and yet average developed country, and yet our outcomes are the same. It's because a lot of these places are owned by private equity companies. Actually, unbeknownst to me, I'm a member of a private equity company that actually owns one of these things, and they do a lot of scans. Let me tell you, I hear about it every year at the annual meeting. Next. So you may need a CAT scan, and we're not telling you not to get a CAT scan. We're not doctors. We don't play one on TV, but make sure you ask the right questions before you agree to any medical test or procedure. And you might say, well, how do I remember to ask these questions? And we'll tell you that is easy. You simply go to the Quizzify website. You go to the app, it says Apple Passes on it, and you click right here on Add to your Apple Wallet, and all the CAT scan questions come right into your, for any scan, go right into your Apple Wallet. And that way, when you get to the doctor, it's not, oh, I forgot what questions I'm supposed to ask. No, you got it with you right here. I could actually show you. In fact, I will, if I have the time, show you my Apple Wallet and show you that I have all this stuff on it. Yeah, here we go. I got. Let's see if you can see it here. Well, you take my word for it. I got Humira scans, Humira for my father scans, doctor, my surprise billing consent. It's free. Just put it in. And if you're embarrassed to ask your doctor, as a lot of people are, if you look right below where the questions are, it says see back, but it's some of these things say, if you're embarrassed to ask these questions, just blame us. Okay, let's go to the next. Okay, let's do one on MRIs. Now, MRIs are very precise. The true or false, they almost always reduce the rate of incorrect diagnosis. And while we're waiting for that, let's see if we have more questions that we can quickly ask here. Would you work with 10,000 lives? Yes. A captive, yeah, you can do it on a captive, we can do it on a captive. Should the TPA contract language be negotiated during the RFP process? Yes. Remember, you hold the cards until they have the contract, okay? So when you are comparing, there used to be this I can't remember what it was called. It was a green, some bank that would say that it was a group that would get all these offers together for banks for mortgages, and they would say, when banks compete, you win, you know. So
Lending
that's,
Tree.
what, sorry?
Lending Tree?
Oh, it's Lending Tree?
Lending
Okay,
Tree.
all right, cool. All right, so what do we have for an answer here, Mark? MRIs almost always reduce the rate. The answers are dramatically false, and that is absolutely correct. They are as likely to increase as reduce. And in fact, if you go to the next slide, this has been known for a while. They can be very effective, but they can also send you in exactly the wrong direction. And this is a study, and we put it on a linked basis to this headline that you're seeing right there. They sent a patient who they knew exactly what the diagnosis was because they'd done surgery on the patient. They knew exactly what the issue was. They sent her as part of a funded study to 10 different imaging centers. And she came back with 49 different diagnoses. No two centers were right. No center got it exactly right. Very few centers actually agreed with each other. So you cannot assume that an MRI is the be-all and end-all just because it's the highest tech thing in the room. So here we're using a finHealth. This is a finHealth example that we use at Quizzify to show how much money is being thrown away just on this one item, just on imaging. This is all imaging combined. For a company that has about 100 million in spend, which is a nice number because it means if you're looking at 6.1 in imaging, that you know that it's 6.1%. So most of the imaging, even though that most of the actual images are X-rays, most of the expense is CAT scans and MRIs, the red and the green. Next. So that is a total of 3.2 million, 3.27 million if you look at the lines. Now in this particular case, the price was actually quite good. $769 for a combined price is actually pretty impressive for a combination of MRI and CAT scan price. The number of these things that were done per thousand boggles the mind, 310 per thousand, except for the fact that it's actually a little lower than average. Okay, so you're spending ridiculous numbers. You're getting ridiculous numbers of scans for your employees. And to put this in perspective, if you could just reduce that 310 by 3%, you'd save $98,000 even at this low price, and you'd pay for all of Quizzify. Okay, a 3% reduction in scans pays for all of Quizzify. The way you get that reduction, just let people know how much radiation is in these things, and suddenly they don't go out and demand inappropriate ones anymore. Next. Okay, and then our pièce de résistance, surprise bills in emergencies. Now, you saw what an emergency room looks like and how they're trying to snooker you. So the question is, what are the odds of getting at least one surprise bill in an in-network emergency visit or emergency admission? There are your choices. And meanwhile, we've got a ridiculous number of questions here, and I'm not sure, we're going to, like I say, answer a lot of them after the fact. I just realized they actually don't all seem to show up at the same time for some reason. Is the benchmark data all of finHealth's book of business, or is it something else? It's Healthcare Blue Book. Yeah, okay.
And
so that,
Medicare.
and Medicare, right, okay.
Yeah, we use some benchmarks, but primarily rely on Healthcare Blue Book because it's an aggregation of plans, and then Medicare because that's specific to the hospital.
And you saw it, and you would not expect to pay 1 times Medicare. And we'll get to that in a sec. Mark, do we have an answer for this one? Okay, yes, it is more than 40%. I think the actual number is 43%, which means almost half of people who go to a in-network facility get a surprise bill. They think they have a copay, they think they have a deductible, but they don't. So Mark, next slide. So it's 43%, and yet most of this 43% is completely avoidable, free, if you look at the next slide. All right, so Quizzify, for those of you who have not been following as closely, has actually solved surprise medical bills for non-elective situations. And I don't mean like, we have something that is going to change behavior or something. We actually have legally solved it. It was in the New York Times. You can click on the article over here. All you have to do is, we talked before about how you can't sue folks, or you can, but you're not going to win. If you've already signed the contract, it makes it much harder. If you've already signed the contract, someone's already paid the bill, very hard to sue. But if instead of signing that financial consent that they put in front of you with those other papers, you say, wait a second, and you give them this little piece of paper, this little card, and we can actually send you some of these cards, and it says, when we send out a follow-up email, we'll tell you how we do that. It says, I consent to appropriate treatment and to be responsible for reasonable charges not covered by insurance up to 2 times the Medicare rate. And this is for a state that has arbitration, but we have it for states that don't have arbitration. And then you sign it and you give it to you, and they can either accept it and treat you, or they can reject it and treat you. Either way, they are required to treat you. You are not required to sign their financial consent. Or you could do what I do, and actually a bunch of other people do now too, which is you take a little piece of tape that we will send you, and you just stick it on your insurance card like I did right there. And then when they ask for your insurance card and they photocopy it, it says for your consent right on the photocopy that they took. We use clear tape for this, so they're probably not going to notice. But it doesn't matter if they do notice, they still have to treat you. Okay, and this once again is right off the Quizzify website, and it's free. Obviously, it works better if you use Quizzify at the same time to educate employees on not to sign the thing, because this only works if you don't sign their thing. So we educate employees not to sign their thing. Next slide. Okay, so to summarize this piece, less imaging, potentially harmful imaging. That's what you're aiming for. And imaging can be, as finHealth shows, 6 to 9% of your total spend. You can repeat this process, this education process with your employees for unnecessary medical procedures. And you know there are a ton out there because suddenly a whole lot of them weren't done in the last 4 or 5 months. And you know something? It's those things, many of those are not going to get done because suddenly people are thinking, you know, I'm just still managing this. It's fine. Why do I need to go get something that I don't need? So you're not going to see sort of a dollar for dollar, a unit for unit reaction in higher units to the lower units of elective care that have taken place during the COVID era. And, you know, surprise bills, I mean, one surprise bill saved pays for all of Quizzify, not to mention that you're going to have one very happy employee on your hands. And now, Mark, I'm going to turn it over to you for summary.
Okay, thank you, Al. I'll just highlight a couple of Quizify's unique value propositions. One of the things is our relationship with Harvard Health Publishing. Doctors at Harvard Medical School will review our medical content, and that seal will be on our questions so that employees will get comfortable. Some of this information we provide, education is surprising. At this point, we have 1,600 unique questions, and they're updated in real time, and we're really timely with the health literacy information. We were the first vendor to get out there with the facts that we're developing around COVID-19, and we updated that very consistently with what came out in terms of revisions from the CDC on prevention. And we're now morphing into adapting to the new normal workplace. So we're developing all sorts of content that's very real time and important. We were the first vendor out to advocate using this SDF, which is actually a non-invasive, much less expensive, much less painful method to drilling and filling cavities. As Al was just explaining, we were the first vendor to come out with this solution on surprise bills in the ER. When Zantac was recalled, we were very quick to remind employees that not to jump in and start taking the proton pump inhibitors, which have some really nasty long-term side effects, real health risks. And back in 2017, we were the first vendor to really get out there and talk about prescription opioids. When everyone was still recommending them for pain management, we were out there talking about in combination with Harvard Health, the incredible addictive qualities of this medication. Now, Quizify is also digitally delivered, so it can get to your employers wherever they are. And lastly, Quizify will put an engagement guarantee in the sense that we'll guarantee Quizify to be the most cost-effective benefit using a Validation Institute measuring tool. And that's a link here that's in the presentation that you'll get, and you can go there and see that measurement tool. I'm just going to spend a moment on the cost.
Actually, hang on. Could you just go back for one quick sec? You mentioned proton pump inhibitors. You want to just give a couple examples? Because I bet you there are people in the room taking them every night right now.
Yeah, that's Nexium, Prilosec, and Prevacid. And they're available over the counter and in prescription form. I think they're one of the most highly used medications out there. They work really well, but they have some really nasty long-term side effects. I mean, heart attacks, strokes, and kidney disease are all things that taking these pills every day can lead to. And there's many people that have been taking them for years. So that's an important piece of health literacy information that people should know. Now, about our pricing. For a group of, let's say, 1,000 to 10,000, traditional wellness programs will cost anywhere from $75 to $150 per employee per year. Biometric screening alone will be $40 to $60 per employee per year. Quizify costs $8 to $12 per employee per year. So we are a less expensive and more cost-effective alternative to traditional wellness solutions. And now I'll turn it back to Al to summarize with a question.
All right, so we're going to wrap up with this one question, and this one is, we promise we're going to put the answer up no matter what it is. We think you learned something today. We think you can learn that you can reduce wasteful medical spending many different ways, that you're paying much more for a lot of things than you think you are, and that particularly for ER and other surprise bills that you should be. We didn't really talk about the cavities, but we mentioned silver diamond fluoride. We're going to be putting out a blog post on that. It is a painless 2-minute solution to cavities that's been in use in the rest of the world for about 50 years, but not in the United States. You need to ask your dentist because they don't like it because they can't make any money on it. And surprise bills should be a thing of the past. So those are just 4 things that you learned. So now we're going to ask you, and we promise we're going to put the answer up. Did you learn something today? It's going to be useful. All right, well, you're compiling that. I got one more finHealth question here. What is finHealth's contingency fee again? What percent?
It really ranges depending upon the size or number of members, but generally speaking, it's somewhere between 20% and up as high as 50% for very small plans.
Okay. Mark, what is the answer to the MacGuffin question? Yes! Score! Okay. All right. So I'd like to say I'm surprised. I know I acted surprised, but in fact, we always get this. So I believe that wraps us right on time, or minute over. So now you can see why we guarantee ourselves and why we guarantee finHealth. So thank you so much to everybody for being here, and to our colleagues from finHealth. And we're going to send you this information. You're going to be able to contact whoever you want. And we will also send you the links to the various things we mentioned on the Quizzify website.
Thank you, everyone.
Okay, thank you, everyone.
Signing off, everybody.